Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the challenge tab of DBZ Dokkan and explaining a little bit how you should progress through the challenge tab and essentially, from start to finish, what's the easiest challenge content, what's the hardest, etc. Now, it's important to note that difficulty in Dokkan, especially its endgame, especially its challenges, is on a very, very big sliding scale. For example, even in stages where you'll see under Novice, like Extreme Super Battle Road and Super Battle Road, these are great places to start, but their stages get progressively harder. Like, the later stages added, the harder it's going to be. Dokkan's content is always sliding towards being harder and harder because numbers are going higher and higher. So generally speaking, outside of certain content like boss rush and things like that, any real challenge content, the later stages are traditionally harder than the beginning stages. And even in some content like the Transcendent God stage, you can have the first 7 stages representing a certain level of difficulty, and then they add 8 stages a year later on and they're a completely different spectrum. So the scale does slide, but this will give you a good idea of kind of where to go. So for beginners, I highly suggest starting with things like Infinite Dragon Ball History, Boss Rush, Super Battle Road, Extreme Super Battle Road, Fighting Legend Goku, and Intensifying Fights. Super Battle Road, Extreme Super Battle Road, like I said, very sliding scale. But for a lot of players, they're good places to start because they allow you to build different category teams, challenge those teams, refine those teams. Infinite Dragon Ball History is usually very easy, but the challenges require you to sometimes build different units. A lot of the times these stages aren't necessarily super hard. Like, if you use the latest units, you'll run through them with ease, except for maybe later ESBR and things. But you get kind of missions and ways to kind of progress your team building and augment your box and build out your teams. And I think this is really what they're really good for. Like, oh, I want to do the Ginyu Force SBR and the Ginyu Force Fighting Legend Goku challenge, so I'll go get the free-to-play team, for example. That's kind of like where these events, I would say, really come in handy. So Infinite Dragon Ball History, Boss Rush, etc., all for there. The intermediate events are kind of like all minute step-ups of this. So you could probably put ESBR into intermediate, I guess, because you have SBR and Novice. So you would finish quite a few SBRs, and then you'd probably say, okay, I want to try the ESBR variant. So maybe ESBR will probably be an intermediate. But you'll also find some of your more bespoke kind of events here. Fighting Legend Vegeta, Collection of Epic Battles, Fighting Spirit of Saiyans, and Pride of the Wicked Bloodlines. Some of these events are slightly different. They have certain gimmicks or angles, maybe certain mechanics. Sometimes they require you to use certain units, yes, but generally speaking, most of the time, these stages are what I would consider being step-ups in difficulty, but not necessarily anything wild. Like, if you compare Fighting Legend Vegeta, Fighting Legend Goku, and even Fighting Legend Frieza, they're all different variations and steps up for Fighting Legend Goku, but yeah, basically pretty straightforward. Then from there, we start to look at more hard and super hard content. Now, I want you to understand, again, it's a sliding scale. So, for example, if you look at Red Zone GT Edition, probably it is one of the first 2 Red Zones. Challenging for sure. Arguably not as challenging as the Birth of Shadow Dragons event, and also probably not nearly as challenging as, for example, Goku Story Red Zones. But the later stages, like the earlier stages in Red Zones, are usually what I call warm-up stages. So you might find, oh, I can beat the first 3 stages of Goku Story Edition and the entire GT Edition, but you may not be able to beat the final stage of each event, if that makes sense. Like, it's a curve. So there's never like a true, oh, this is this. But I would say you probably start Red Zones after you've done ESBR and SBRs. At least in my opinion, that would be what I would say. So Ultimate Red Zone GT Edition, Ultimate Red Zone Movie Edition, Majin Buu Saga, and even some of the gimmicky events or the hard events, but they have certain mechanics that can make them a lot easier. Like, for example, Hard Pounding Heroines is incredibly tough an event, but if you bring the right mechanisms, it's not a tough event. It doesn't necessarily require you to have the absolute best units in the game to beat it. It actually requires you to have certain mechanics to beat it. The same can be said about the Broly event. Broly event is super hard, but bring a Videl and a Goten kid, and all of a sudden the event's not that hard, because that's the mechanics of the event. So there are certain events like that where they are hard events, and they could potentially be super hard events, but they're probably not. In terms of the super hard events, this generally is what I'd say is the final stage of these events, or the second to last, or just in general, these events probably require you to have the latest units. Like, to beat them, to beat their stage, to beat their missions, you need to have the top level units. So you need to have, for example, the latest 10th anniversary units, or latest DCAs, or units released in the last 6 months. And generally these events will coincide with this. They will be premeditated or built around you having the units from the last, I would say, 12 to 6 months, whether that's EZAs, SEZAs, releases, etc. And that's kind of what they're geared for. They're geared for that level of power, not just specifically those units, but that level of power. And Festival Battles falls in there. Very specific, very, very tough event, but a very peculiar one as well, because Infinite Dragon Ball history, all of that. So yeah, hope this helps. Bye.